Don't forget the gravy, Margaret, my daughter-in-law Vanessa called across the living room, raising her wine glass while 12 people laughed around the Christmas tree. After all, you're the reason this family survives the holidays. Everyone chuckled like it was harmless. Like I was supposed to laugh too. I stood in the kitchen holding a tray of sweet potatoes, my fingers aching from arthritis after cooking for nearly 14 hours straight. The oven behind me blasted dry heat against my back while cinnamon, turkey drippings, and burnt sugar clung to my sweater. Outside the windows, snow covered the Holloway Ranch in a perfect layer of white, the kind people put on Christmas cards. Inside, I felt invisible. Vanessa walked into the kitchen still smiling from whatever story she'd been telling the guests. Her cream-colored sweater matched the expensive decorations she insisted made the house look classy. She picked up the apron hanging beside the sink and tossed it toward me casually. "You forgot to wear your uniform," she said. I caught it before it hit the floor. Red letters stretched across the front. Holiday staff. More laughter drifted in from the dining room. Ethan must have seen it earlier because he didn't react at all when Vanessa walked back out smiling. My own son barely looked up from his phone anymore unless he needed something. I tied the apron around my waist without saying a word. At 68 years old, silence had become my last form of dignity. The dining room table sparkled under candlelight. Gold napkin rings. Crystal glasses. Pine garlands running down the center beside tiny white lights. Every detail had been arranged by my hands. Every cookie iced by me. Every stocking stuffed while everyone else slept. But somehow Vanessa always managed to present Christmas like a production she directed herself. Mom's happiest when she's busy, she loved telling people. As if exhaustion was my favorite hobby. I carried out the sweet potatoes carefully while conversation rolled around me. Nobody paused when I entered. Nobody offered me a seat. Vanessa was explaining her holiday hosting tips to her friends while Ethan carved the turkey I had seasoned overnight with my late husband's recipe. My grandson Tyler glanced up briefly. "Grandma, where's the hot cocoa?" he asked before returning to his tablet. "Kitchen, sweetheart," I answered softly. Vanessa clapped her hands suddenly. "Okay everyone, family picture before dessert." The room stirred with excitement. People gathered near the massive Christmas tree while phones appeared from every direction. I stood frozen beside the dining table holding an empty casserole dish. Nobody called my name. Vanessa adjusted Ethan's collar. "Scoot closer," she said brightly. "Perfect." The camera flashed. I watched my family smiling together while my reflection stared back faintly from the dark window behind them. Small. Blurry. Forgotten. Then I heard Vanessa whisper something to her sister near the fireplace. Honestly, if Margaret ever stopped doing Christmas for us, this whole family would fall apart. Her sister laughed quietly. Then make sure she never stops. I looked down at the apron against my chest. Holiday staff. My eyes drifted toward the grandfather clock near the staircase. 11:47 p.m. By tomorrow morning, none of them would know where I had gone. I stayed awake long after the last guest left the ranch house that night. The dishwasher hummed softly beside me while snow tapped against the kitchen windows in slow, frozen waves. Upstairs, I could hear laughter drifting from the guest bedrooms. Vanessa had convinced everyone to stay overnight for a magical family Christmas morning. Nobody asked if I wanted the house full for another day. Nobody asked if I was tired. I stood at the sink washing crystal glasses by hand because Vanessa claimed the dishwasher left spots on them. My fingers trembled slightly in the hot water. Not from weakness. From exhaustion. 42 Christmas dinners. 42 years of waking before sunrise to make cinnamon rolls from scratch because Ethan loved them as a little boy. 42 years of wrapping gifts after midnight while my late husband Robert pretended not to notice how tired I looked. Back then, Christmas had still felt warm. Real. I dried the final glass carefully and placed it beside the others. The kitchen counters looked almost untouched now, as if the 12 hours of cooking had never happened. That was the strange thing about motherhood. Your work disappeared the moment everyone finished enjoying it. I turned off the overhead light and walked slowly toward the hallway when I heard voices from the living room. Vanessa and her sister Claire were still awake. I paused beside the doorway unnoticed. "You seriously have her trained perfectly," Claire whispered with a laugh. "Margaret acts like she enjoys being everyone's servant." Vanessa lowered her voice, but not enough. "Please. If I let her sit around all day, she would start acting lonely and emotional again. Keeping her busy is better for everybody." They both laughed softly. My chest tightened, but I did not move. "Honestly," Vanessa continued, "she would fall apart without us. She has nowhere else to go." I stared down at the hardwood floor while the Christmas tree lights flickered across the walls in red and gold reflections. Nowhere else to go. The word settled inside me heavier than I expected. Because once upon a time I had believed this house was mine too. Robert and I bought the ranch 33 years ago when Ethan was still in middle school. We painted these walls ourselves. We planted the pine trees lining the driveway together during our second winter here. Back then, the property was mostly dirt and fencing. Robert used to joke that we were building a home strong enough to hold generations. After he passed 3 years ago, everything changed slowly. Quietly. Vanessa started reorganizing the kitchen without asking me. Ethan stopped sitting beside me during movies. Family decisions happened in rooms I was no longer invited into. It was never one cruel moment. Just hundreds of tiny ones. Tiny enough to make you question yourself. I walked upstairs carefully and closed my bedroom door behind me. The room still smelled faintly like Robert's cedar aftershave. I sat at the edge of the bed staring at the framed photo on my nightstand. Robert smiling beside our old pickup truck. Me beside him wearing flour on my cheek after baking Christmas pies. We looked happy. Tired. But happy. Then my eyes shifted toward the small envelope resting inside my dresser drawer. The helicopter reservation confirmation. Aspen Ridge Mountain Lodge. Departure time, 8 a.m. sharp. Passenger name, Margaret Holloway. I opened the drawer slowly and ran my fingers across the paper. For the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar settle quietly inside my chest. Not sadness. Not anger. Freedom. I woke up at 4:30 Christmas morning out of habit. For a moment, I forgot everything and reached automatically for the thick wool robe hanging beside my bed, already thinking about cinnamon rolls and turkey basting schedules. Then I remembered. The helicopter. Aspen. Freedom. I sat quietly on the edge of the mattress while pale blue winter light crept through the curtains. The house was silent except for the soft groan of the furnace downstairs. Normally by now I would already be in the kitchen measuring flour and brewing coffee strong enough to keep 12 people cheerful through the morning chaos. Instead, I simply listened. There was something almost sacred about the silence when nobody needed anything from me. I dressed slowly. Cream cashmere sweater. Dark jeans. Snow boots Robert bought me years ago during our trip to Colorado. I brushed my silver hair carefully and applied lipstick for the first time in months. Not because anyone would notice. Because I wanted to recognize myself again. Downstairs, the Christmas tree still glowed softly in the living room. Wrapping paper waited untouched beneath the branches. Vanessa had insisted all presents remain unopened until after breakfast so she could capture the perfect family moment for social media. I walked through the kitchen one last time. Copper pans hanging above the stove. Cooling rack stacked beside the sink. Handwritten recipes tucked into the old wooden box Robert carved for me decades ago. My life was in this kitchen. So was my exhaustion. I opened the refrigerator and looked at the uncooked turkey resting inside its roasting pan. Vanessa never learned how long a 22-pound bird actually took to cook. She thought Christmas dinner appeared magically because it always had. I took a small piece of stationery from the counter drawer and wrote carefully in blue ink. This year, I chose peace. I folded the note once and placed it beside the coffee machine where Vanessa would see it first. Then I picked up my overnight bag and slipped quietly through the mudroom door into the freezing morning air. Snow crunched beneath my boots as I crossed the backyard. The ranch looked beautiful before sunrise. Pine trees heavy with fresh snow. White fences stretching across the property. The same property Ethan once raced across in red mittens while Robert chased him laughing through snowdrifts waist deep. Sometimes memories were warm enough to hurt. I stopped near the old barn and looked back at the house. Yellow light suddenly flickered on upstairs. Someone was awake. Probably Vanessa checking her phone before beginning another performance of perfect motherhood. My phone buzzed softly inside my coat pocket. Daniel Mercer. I answered quietly. Good morning, Margaret. His voice carried the calm confidence I remembered from years ago. You ready? I looked toward the dark horizon where dawn slowly approached. More than I expected. A low mechanical sound echoed faintly through the mountains moments later. At first distant. Then growing louder. The helicopter emerged above the snow-covered trees like something unreal against the pale winter sky. Wind swept across the property in sharp icy bursts as it descended toward the open field behind the barn. Snow spiraled wildly around me. Upstairs windows began lighting up across the house one by one. Shapes moved behind the glass. Confused. Alarmed. Watching. The helicopter touched down smoothly while Daniel stepped out wearing a dark shearling jacket and leather gloves. Even after all these years, he still carried himself like the Air Force pilot he used to be. Calm under pressure. Certain in motion. He smiled the moment he saw me. Not the polite smile people gave older women when they felt obligated. A real one. Merry Christmas, Margaret, he said warmly while taking my bag from my hand. Behind us, the back door of the house slammed open. Vanessa's voice cut through the freezing air. Margaret? I turned slowly toward the house while snow whipped around us in silver waves. Vanessa stood frozen on the porch in silk pajamas beneath Ethan's winter coat, staring at the helicopter like she could not understand what she was seeing. Ethan appeared behind her seconds later, his face pale with confusion. For the first time in years, nobody was asking me to make breakfast. Vanessa hurried down the porch steps through the snow, wrapping Ethan's coat tighter around herself while icy wind pushed strands of blonde hair across her face. Margaret, what is this? She shouted over the sound of the helicopter blades. Her voice carried something unfamiliar now. Not confidence. Panic. Ethan followed behind her looking disoriented, still wearing plaid pajama pants and winter boots half unlaced. He stared at Daniel, then at me, as if trying to understand how his mother had suddenly become someone he did not fully know. Mom, he called out, what is going on? Snow swirled around us in thick white circles while the early morning sky slowly brightened over the ranch. I looked at my son for a long moment before answering. He was 42 years old now, older than Robert had been when we bought this property. Yet standing there in the cold, confused because breakfast was not waiting for him, he looked strangely young to me. I am leaving for Christmas, I said calmly. Vanessa let out a sharp laugh that sounded more nervous than amused. Leaving? Today? Her eyes shifted toward the house behind us where lights continued turning on room by room. Guests were waking up. Children would soon start asking where the cinnamon rolls were. The turkey is not even in the oven, she said quickly. People will be here by noon. I adjusted my gloves slowly. I know. Ethan stepped closer through the snow. Mom, if this is about last night, Vanessa was joking. Everybody was joking. I almost smiled at that. Funny how people always called cruelty a joke after realizing it had consequences. Daniel remained beside the helicopter quietly, giving me space while keeping one hand near my overnight bag. The rotor blades whipped cold air across the field hard enough to sting my cheeks. Vanessa crossed her arms tightly. You cannot seriously leave us to handle Christmas alone. There it was. Not concern for me. Not confusion about why I felt hurt. Only fear about what would happen without me carrying everything. I looked toward the house one last time. Through the large kitchen windows, I could see the counters waiting untouched. No pies cooling beside the sink. No coffee brewing. No music playing softly while wrapping paper covered the dining table. For years, I believed I was creating holiday magic for my family. Standing there now, I realized I had mostly been protecting them from responsibility. Ethan rubbed a hand across his face tiredly. "Mom, come inside. We can talk about this." His voice softened slightly then. "Tyler is going to be upset if you disappear on Christmas morning." The guilt almost worked. Almost. Because motherhood trains you to ignore your own pain the moment someone else feels uncomfortable. But something inside me had finally grown too exhausted to keep apologizing for existing. "Tyler will survive one disappointing Christmas," I answered quietly. "I survived many." Vanessa's expression hardened immediately. "This is unbelievably selfish." Daniel glanced at me carefully after hearing that word, but I only nodded slowly to myself. Selfish. After decades of cooking, cleaning, hosting, sacrificing, and disappearing quietly into the background so everybody else could shine, choosing one peaceful Christmas for myself suddenly became selfish. The realization felt strangely freeing. A front door slammed behind us. Claire stepped outside onto the porch clutching her phone. "Vanessa," she yelled nervously, "the smoke alarm is going off." Vanessa spun around instantly. "What?" "I think somebody left the cinnamon rolls in too long." I closed my eyes briefly against the cold wind. Every Christmas morning for 27 years, I had removed those rolls from the oven exactly 2 minutes before the sugar glaze burned. Ethan looked toward the house helplessly while distant alarm beeping echoed faintly across the snowy property. Then he looked back at me. "Mom," he started softly. But I was already walking toward the helicopter. The moment the helicopter lifted off the ground, something inside me loosened for the first time in years. Snow exploded beneath us in wide white circles while the ranch slowly shrank below. I watched Ethan standing motionless near the barn, one hand shielding his eyes from the wind. Vanessa was already storming back toward the house, her arms flailing as she shouted orders nobody seemed prepared to follow. Even from the air, I could sense the panic spreading through the family like smoke. Daniel adjusted his headset and glanced toward me with a small smile. "You doing all right?" I looked out the window again as the property disappeared beneath thick clouds and winter sunlight. "I think so," I answered honestly. My voice sounded unfamiliar. Lighter somehow. The helicopter moved north over frozen rivers and endless pine forests dusted with fresh snow. Everything below looked peaceful from this height. Tiny cabins. Empty highways. Thin trails of chimney smoke rising into the pale December sky. I rested my gloved hands quietly in my lap while warmth from the cabin slowly returned feeling to my fingers. Daniel reached beside his seat and handed me a silver thermos. "Coffee," he said. "Still hot." I wrapped my hands around it carefully. "You remembered. You used to drink 2 cups before sunrise every Christmas morning," he said casually. "Robert always joked nobody should speak to you before the 2nd cup." Hearing my husband's name no longer hurt the way it used to. Instead, it felt warm. Like opening an old cedar chest filled with winter coats and forgotten photographs. Daniel had been Robert's closest friend for nearly 30 years. They flew together in the Air Force when they were young, long before mortgages and arthritis and funerals changed the shape of life. After Robert passed away, Daniel checked on me quietly every few months. Never intrusive. Never pitying. Just present. "I almost canceled last night," I admitted softly while staring out at the mountains. Daniel nodded like he understood without needing explanation. Most people spend so long taking care of everyone else that freedom starts feeling selfish. I thought about Vanessa saying exactly that word only minutes earlier. Selfish. Funny how easily people called a woman selfish the moment she stopped sacrificing herself for them. Daniel leaned back slightly in his seat. You know what Robert told me once? I turned toward him. He said your family depended on you so much that one day they might forget you were a person before you were useful. My chest tightened unexpectedly. Because Robert had seen it happening long before I did. Outside the window, the mountains grew larger now. Sharp white peaks rising through thick morning clouds. Sunlight reflected across the snow so brightly it almost hurt my eyes. Beautiful. Quiet. Untouched. My phone vibrated inside my coat pocket for the 6th time since takeoff. Ethan. Then Vanessa. Then Ethan again. I did not answer. Another message appeared moments later from Claire. The turkey is still frozen in the middle. Vanessa is freaking out. I stared at the screen for several seconds before slipping the phone back into my pocket untouched. Somewhere below us, my family was discovering how much invisible work I had carried every single holiday without thanks. No cinnamon rolls. No labeled presents. No prepared turkey. No carefully timed casseroles warming in the oven. Christmas at the Holloway Ranch had always looked effortless because I spent decades making sure nobody saw the effort. Daniel pointed ahead toward a cluster of buildings tucked between snow-covered mountains. Aspen Ridge, he said. Merry Christmas, Margaret. I looked out at the lodge waiting below us, surrounded by towering evergreens wrapped in white snow and golden morning light. For the first time in years, Christmas morning belonged to me. Aspen Ridge looked like something from an old Christmas movie Robert used to love. The lodge sat beneath towering mountains wrapped in snow so white it almost glowed beneath the afternoon sun. Evergreen garlands lined the wooden balconies, and soft golden lights hung from the rooftops despite the daylight. The moment I stepped out of the helicopter, cold mountain air filled my lungs so sharply it made me feel awake in a way I had not felt for years. A young concierge in a navy winter coat greeted us warmly and took my overnight bag inside while Daniel handled the landing arrangements. Nobody here knew me as somebody's mother. Somebody's cook. Somebody's invisible helper. I was simply Margaret Holloway, guest of cabin 14. The thought felt strange enough to make me emotional for a moment. Inside the lodge, everything smelled like cedarwood, coffee, and cinnamon. A massive stone fireplace crackled near the center of the lobby while families sat together drinking hot chocolate in thick wool sweaters. Soft piano music drifted from hidden speakers overhead. I stood there quietly removing my gloves while snow melted from my boots onto the polished wood floor. No one asked me to refill drinks. No one handed me dirty dishes. No one needed me to save Christmas. Daniel walked beside me toward the front desk. I hope you like the suite, he said. It has a mountain view. I laughed softly under my breath. Daniel, at this point I would be happy with a room that nobody expects me to clean afterward. His expression shifted slightly then. Not pity. Understanding. Margaret, he said carefully, you deserved rest long before today. Those words followed me upstairs hours later after Daniel returned to his own cabin across the property. The suite was warm and quiet with enormous windows overlooking snow-covered pine trees stretching toward the mountains. A small Christmas tree glowed softly near the fireplace beside a basket filled with blankets and books. Someone had left fresh peppermint cookies on the dining table along with a handwritten card welcoming me to Aspen Ridge. I sat slowly on the edge of the king-sized bed and stared around the room in disbelief. No wrapping paper. No grocery lists. No timers going off in the kitchen. Just silence. Peaceful silence. My phone buzzed again. 11 missed calls now. 3 voicemails. 6 text messages. I finally opened one from Ethan. Mom, please answer. Vanessa is upset and everybody keeps asking where you are. Tyler is crying. We are trying to figure everything out. I read the message twice before setting the phone face down on the nightstand. Not because I hated my family. That was the hardest part. I loved them deeply. Probably too deeply. Love had become the excuse I used every time they overlooked me. Every time they treated my exhaustion like a personality trait instead of a warning sign. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. I opened the door to find an older woman carrying a tray with tomato soup, grilled cheese sandwiches, and tea. "Compliments of the lodge," she said kindly. "Christmas lunch for guests arriving today." I almost laughed from shock. Someone had made lunch for me. Not because I earned it. Not because I hosted an event or sacrificed my holiday. Simply because I existed there as a guest deserving care. After she left, I carried the tray toward the window overlooking the mountains. Snow drifted slowly through the air outside while distant laughter echoed from somewhere below near the ski trails. I dipped the grilled cheese into the soup and realized something embarrassing. It was the first hot Christmas meal I had eaten sitting down in nearly 20 years. My eyes burned unexpectedly. Not from sadness this time. Relief. Deep, exhausting relief. Then my phone rang again. Vanessa. I let it ring until silence returned to the room. By late afternoon, snow covered the balconies outside my suite in thick white layers while golden lights flickered across the lodge property below. Families gathered near outdoor fire pits wrapped in scarves and winter coats, laughing softly beneath the falling snow. Somewhere nearby, children were singing Christmas carols slightly off-key while waiters carried trays of hot cider through the courtyard. Everything felt calm. Warm. Human. I sat beside the fireplace in my suite wearing wool socks and reading a mystery novel I found on the shelf near the bed when my phone buzzed again. This time it was not Vanessa. It was Tyler. I hesitated before answering. "Grandma?" His small voice sounded shaky. "Hi, sweetheart. Are you coming back?" I closed the book carefully in my lap. Through the windows behind me, snow continued falling silently over the mountains. "Not today, honey." He sniffled softly. "Mom burned the ham." Despite everything, I nearly smiled. "I am sorry to hear that. Dad is yelling because nobody can find the gravy recipe." Another pause. Aunt Claire dropped the pie. I leaned back slowly against the chair cushion while the fire crackled beside me. In the background, I could hear muffled arguing. Cabinet doors slamming. Vanessa's voice barking instructions at somebody. "Grandma?" Tyler whispered again. "Yeah? Mom says you ruined Christmas." The word settled quietly between us. Strange how often people blamed the woman who stopped carrying the weight instead of the people who expected her to carry it alone forever. "Do you think I ruined Christmas?" I asked gently. Tyler grew quiet for several seconds. "No," he admitted softly. "I think everybody misses you." My throat tightened unexpectedly. Not because of Vanessa. Not because of Ethan. Because children usually tell the truth before adults teach them not to. "I miss you too, sweetheart," I said carefully. "But sometimes grown-ups need space to remember how to appreciate each other." Tyler did not fully understand, but he accepted the answer with the simple trust children still carry before life complicates love. After we hung up, I stared into the fire for a long time. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. "Ethan." This time I answered. Silence greeted me first. Then a tired sigh. "Mom." He sounded exhausted. Older somehow. "How bad is it?" I asked quietly. Ethan laughed once under his breath without humor. "You really want the list?" I waited. The cinnamon rolls burned. Claire tried making mashed potatoes and somehow used powdered sugar instead of flour in the gravy. Vanessa forgot to thaw the second turkey. Half the guests already left because dinner is delayed 3 hours. I closed my eyes briefly. For decades I had timed everything down to the minute so nobody ever noticed how complicated Christmas really was. "Tyler says you are all fighting." Ethan exhaled heavily. "Vanessa is stressed." I almost answered automatically with comfort. That old instinct rose inside me before I caught it. Instead I simply asked, is she stressed because Christmas is difficult or because she expected someone else to make it easy? Silence again. Longer this time. Somewhere behind Ethan, I heard Vanessa snap sharply at somebody to stop touching the appetizers. Then Ethan spoke quietly. Mom. I do not think I realized how much you actually did around here. There it was. Not an apology yet. But the beginning of one. Sometimes realization arrives before remorse. I looked around the suite again. The untouched tea beside me. The quiet fireplace. The peaceful snowfall outside the windows. For the first time in years, Christmas evening was not ending with me scrubbing dishes alone after everyone else went to sleep. Ethan's voice softened further. The house feels strange without you here. I stared into the fire while snow drifted past the dark windows beyond it. Maybe, I said carefully, because this is the first time any of you noticed I was holding it together. The next morning, I woke to sunlight reflecting across fresh snow outside the suite windows so brightly it filled the entire room with gold and white light. For several peaceful seconds, I forgot what day it was. No rushing downstairs. No checking oven temperatures. No panic over forgotten ingredients. Just silence and the soft sound of wind moving through the pine trees outside. I stayed in bed longer than usual, wrapped beneath thick blankets while snow drifted slowly across the mountains beyond the glass. It felt luxurious in a way expensive things never truly do. Around 9 o'clock, I walked downstairs to the lodge dining room wearing a soft gray sweater and carrying a novel beneath my arm. Families filled the room quietly eating breakfast beside enormous windows overlooking the ski slopes. Somebody laughed near the fireplace. A little girl in red mittens dropped a marshmallow into her cocoa and burst into giggles. Everything felt gentle here. Unhurried. A waiter brought me coffee and blueberry pancakes without anyone demanding something from me first. I had just taken my first bite when I noticed Daniel entering the dining room holding his phone with a strange expression on his face. "Morning," he said while sitting across from me. "You look rested." I forgot what that felt like. He hesitated slightly before sliding the phone toward me across the table. "You might want to see this." Vanessa's social media page filled the screen. A carefully staged photo showed the Christmas table from the night before. Candles lit. Wine glasses sparkling. Everyone smiling stiffly around plates of visibly overcooked food. Her caption read, "Family holidays are exhausting, but worth every second when you are surrounded by love." I stared at the image quietly before noticing the comments underneath. "Where is Margaret? Did she finally get a vacation? Thought she usually hosted Christmas." One comment near the top stood out most. "Maybe people should appreciate the woman who carried the holidays before she got tired of carrying them." Hundreds of likes sat beneath it already. Daniel watched my face carefully. "Looks like people are noticing things." I handed the phone back slowly. Vanessa cares more about appearances than honesty. That tends to collapse eventually. Before I could answer, my own phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it until I saw the area code from home. "Hello? Mrs. Holloway?" a professional male voice asked. "This is Andrew Keller from Keller and Burns Legal Services." My stomach tightened slightly. "Yes? I apologize for contacting you during the holiday, but your son requested copies of the property trust documents this morning. During that review, several concerns came to our attention." Daniel looked up immediately while I listened quietly. "Concerns? Your late husband established specific conditions tied to the ranch ownership transfer after his passing. One condition states that your permanent residency and personal dignity within the household must be maintained at all times." I stared out the dining room windows while snow continued falling softly outside. Robert. Even after all these years, he was still protecting me. "And if those conditions are violated?" I asked carefully. The lawyer paused briefly. "Then the ownership transfer process can be suspended pending further review." Silence settled heavily around me. Suddenly, Vanessa's panic made perfect sense. This was never only about Christmas dinner. The ranch. The property. The life they assumed belonged to them already. Daniel leaned back slowly once the call ended. Robert really thought ahead. I wrapped both hands around my coffee cup while warmth drifted into my fingers. I think he saw things long before I allowed myself to. Another message appeared on my phone seconds later. This time from Vanessa herself. Margaret, please call me. We need to talk immediately. Not Mom. Not family. Margaret. I stared at the message for several seconds before locking the screen again. Outside the windows, snow continued falling across the mountains in complete silence while somewhere far away, back at the ranch, the family that once treated me like invisible holiday staff was suddenly terrified of losing everything. On my third morning at Aspen Ridge, the snowfall finally stopped. Sunlight spilled across the mountains in soft gold ribbons while fresh snow sparkled untouched beneath the pine trees. I stood on the balcony outside my suite wrapped in a thick wool coat, holding a cup of coffee between my hands while cold mountain air filled my lungs. Somewhere below, people were laughing near the ski lifts. The world kept moving peacefully, even while my family back home struggled through the consequences of finally losing the woman who held everything together. My phone had gone quiet overnight. No frantic calls. No desperate messages. Just silence. The kind that arrives after panic burns itself out. Part of me expected relief from that silence. Instead, I felt something sadder. Clarity. Because once people stop demanding things from you, you finally hear how empty the relationship had become underneath the need. Around noon, Daniel invited me to walk through the village below the lodge. Small shops lined the snowy streets with wreaths hanging from every window and soft Christmas music drifting from hidden speakers overhead. Couples carried shopping bags and steaming cups of cocoa while children pulled sleds through the snow. Nobody knew my history there. Nobody looked at me and saw obligation. We stopped outside a bookstore where golden lights glowed warmly through frosted windows. Daniel glanced toward me carefully. You look different. I smiled faintly. Different good or different alarming? Different peaceful. The word settled gently inside me. Peaceful. I realized I could not remember the last Christmas anyone used that word to describe me. Back at the ranch, holidays had become performances measured by perfect meals, spotless counters, and smiling photographs online. Peace had nothing to do with it anymore. My phone buzzed once just as we reached the bookstore entrance. Ethan. I stared at the screen before answering. Hi, Mom. His voice sounded quieter now. Less defensive. Hi, sweetheart. A long pause followed. Then finally, I owe you an apology. Snow drifted softly around us while people passed carrying wrapped presents beneath glowing streetlights. I remained silent, letting him continue. I think I got so used to you always handling everything that I stopped seeing how unfair it became. His voice tightened slightly. And I let Vanessa treat you badly because it was easier than confronting it. Hearing my son admit the truth hurt more than denial ever had. Because honesty leaves nothing left to hide behind. The lawyer explained the trust conditions, Ethan continued carefully. But honestly, Mom, even without the ranch, I do not like who we became. I closed my eyes briefly against the cold air. Somewhere deep down, I had waited years to hear those words. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted acknowledgement. I never wanted the family to fall apart, I said quietly. I just got tired of disappearing inside it. Ethan exhaled shakily. Vanessa wants to apologize too. I looked out across the snowy village glowing beneath thousands of Christmas lights. Maybe someday, I answered honestly. But right now, I need time remembering who I am when nobody is asking me to serve them. Another silence. Softer this time. I understand, Ethan whispered. After the call ended, Daniel opened the bookstore door for me while warm air and the scent of coffee drifted outside. Everything okay? He asked gently. I looked back once toward the mountains towering beyond the village, bright and endless beneath the winter sky. Then I smiled for real. Not the polite smile I wore through years of exhaustion. A real one. I said softly, this might finally be my first peaceful Christmas. And for the first time in decades, it truly was.